what's happening inside.
For Alzheimer's, se dice la enfermedad diabetes tipo 3. They call it type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. The primary problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's disease is that the brain is no longer properly metabolizing glucose, and glucose is the brain's primary fuel. So if the brain is no longer able to process this fuel, it's not getting energy. And so I explain it that Alzheimer's is an energy shortage in the brain. And it's like your brain is getting tired. And what happens when you get tired? You make mistakes, you get clumsy. So what happens when your brain gets tired? I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but that's really the main problem. And we're not sure why that problem is happening, but that is the major problem, that the brain cells are basically starving to death.
Okay. I think it's a good time to throw you one of those statements. But Amy, everybody knows that the brain can only work with glucose as fuel.
Right. Well, so that's not true. Glucose is one of the fuels the brain can use. The brain can also run on something called ketones, which are just another fuel molecule that's very normal in the human body. Most people are not in a metabolic state where they're producing ketones. There's different ways to make it happen, but the main way to make it happen is to eat a very, very low carbohydrate diet. Glucose, which fuels the brain and a lot of the rest of the body, comes from carbohydrate and other things, but the main source is carbohydrate in your food. And when you all of a sudden don't have a lot of carbohydrate in your diet, when you're very low carb diet, your body and your brain have to switch to using something else. And they'll switch to using mostly fat. And when you break down a lot of fat, you produce ketones as a secondary byproduct of that. And the ketones are very, very good for fueling the brain. So it's not true that glucose is the only fuel for the brain.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Now, there is something that that worries me a lot about this whole Alzheimer's mechanism, and it is that there's this statement that I found. Maybe it's true, I don't know, but it's very scary. And it's like, when you find out the first symptoms of the disease, there is nothing that you can actually do about it, because it's been like that. It's been there for a while now. Is that true?
So parts of it are true, parts of it aren't. The part that's true is that the very scary thing about this disease is that by the time you have enough signs and symptoms to be diagnosed, the problem has been going on for a long time. In some people, it's years. They can, so if the problem is that your brain is not using glucose properly, they can measure and identify the decline in your brain's use of glucose in people as young as their 30s and 40s. And those people have no signs or symptoms of dementia. Their brain is working perfectly fine, but they're already on the path. But their brain is compensating. They're still young and healthy that they don't notice there's a problem. It's only when the problem goes on for so long that the damage becomes so severe and so widespread. That's when you start having your symptoms. By the time that happens, by the time you cross that threshold, the problem is already really severe. Okay. So at the moment you get diagnosed, you're already well into that disease pathway. Now, the part that I disagree with, that is the true part. The part that I disagree with is that there's nothing we can do. Now I have to be clear, the research is in the very early stages. There's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but that doesn't mean we don't know anything. There is plenty we do know. And one of the beautiful things that we know is that even though the brain in Alzheimer's is not using glucose properly, it does use ketones properly. So the brain is like starving because it can't use glucose. Let's give it ketones. Let's at least provide some fuel from somewhere else.
That makes me feel a little less bleak.
Like I said, the research is in its very early stages, but it's very promising because right now there are no drugs that are effective. No hay alternativa. There's nothing that works. There's nothing that's effective.
Estamos cagados.
Yeah, there's no, at the very best the drugs do is maybe slow the decline. They slow down you getting worse. They don't stop you from getting worse. They just help you get worse more slowly.
Oh man. Let's go back to scaring people. What can be counted, or what are like signs of cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease? Like,
it's different people experience it differently. It could come on as just being a little bit forgetful. So if you'll hear that people like accountants or people that do a lot of math in their profession, that they calculate very easily in their head, they start to not be able to do that kind of math in their head as easily, misplacing things, forgetting words. Like if we're having a conversation and I forget the word for the mug or the cup, like no puedo recordar la palabra. I'll just say a little bit of Spanish here and there. Es bueno para mí para platicar.
Muy bien.
So like little things like that, or personality changes sometimes can come on, like just your behavior is abnormal for you.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
like people get irritated easily, or
that's a pretty common one, getting irritable, getting angry when that's not normally your personality. That's usually a later symptom though. Usually it's just like things slip your mind. Like you don't normally have to write everything down, but now you start forgetting you had an appointment that you forgot, or just things you were supposed to do during the day that you forgot about. So it starts very small, and it's usually only when that happens more and more that people notice it.
Okay, now you're freaking the shit out of me. Like I have always had it. but there's, that's important to know that there are people who are naturally forgetful. That's not.
Yeah, that's an important thing. Is it different from how you are normally, and is it getting worse?
So that's the point. I mean, are you doing it more, or is it getting more confusing?
Right.
Or if you are very familiar with a task, can you not perform it correctly?
Bueno, vamos a hablar de los electrolitos y de tu cerebro. ¿Sabías que tener un nivel adecuado de electrolitos es vital para tener salud cerebral? Desde prevenir el apelotardamiento y esa imposibilidad que tenemos para concentrarnos, hasta más seriamente de prevenir la aparición de la enfermedad de Alzheimer. Tener un balance adecuado de electrolitos es vital para mantener tu cerebro funcionando de manera adecuada, porque resulta que las neuronas dependen de los electrolitos y el balance de los electrolitos para poder comunicarse entre ellas, y también para mantener un nivel saludable de fluido dentro de la cabeza, que es donde tu cerebro flota. En algún punto yo ya hablé de la hiponatremia y de lo terrible que es, y los síntomas espantosos que tienen, que es, no sé, taquicardia y fatiga y dolor de cabeza y convulsiones, y la gente se muere en las zonas de calor. Eso es terrible. Hay un sector de la población bastante grande, no sé qué tan grande, pero es bastante grande, y yo me incluyo ahí, porque yo pensaba que muchas cosas eran normales cuando realmente no lo son. Tener taquicardia no es normal. Ver lucecitas cuando uno se pone de pie no es normal. Tener frío todo el tiempo no es normal. No ser capaz de concentrarse en la segunda porción del día no es normal. Y tampoco es normal quererse morir cada vez que uno hace ejercicio. Eso no es normal. Tampoco es normal tener calambres. Y no sé, si alguna vez tú has tenido el problema de tener calambres, esos calambres que dan en la mitad de la noche, que lo hacen a uno quererse morir, tú le cuentas a la gente te dice, no, es que te falta magnesio. Entonces tú dices, listo, me falta magnesio, voy a la farmacia, me compro las píldoras de magnesio, por ahí óxido de magnesio, que te va a dar churres. Te compras el magnesio, te tomas el magnesio y no pasa nada, sigues teniendo los calambres. Lo que la gente no sabe, y por eso no te lo dicen, es que niveles insuficientes de sodio afectan la absorción y el uso adecuado adecuado de magnesio dentro del cuerpo. Y no solamente de magnesio, sino también de calcio y también de potasio. Consumir potasio o una absorción correcta de potasio asegura que no desarrolles presión arterial alta, que es uno de los factores de riesgo más importantes para la aparición de la enfermedad de Alzheimer. Si están en desbalance, no van a funcionar como tienen que funcionar. Por eso es que a la hora de hidratarme yo voy siempre a Drink Element, porque Drink Element elimina completamente la incertidumbre de no estoy adquiriendo los que son en las proporciones que son y la clase de electrolitos que son. Yo simplemente los mezclo en agua, me los tomo y tengo todas las bondades de tener un balance adecuado de electrolitos. Entonces cada vez que tengo que efectuar tareas en donde tengo que concentrarme mucho, siempre los tengo a la mano. Además son deliciosos, así que si quieres probarlos y si tienes deficiencia de sodio, lo cual es bastante probable, si tú tomas mucha agua tienes deficiencia de sodio, si tú tomas mucho café tienes deficiencia de sodio, si tú estás haciendo una dieta baja en carbohidratos tienes deficiencia de sodio, si estás comiendo más limpio, o sea, si eliminaste las comidas de paquete tienes deficiencia de sodio. Si ese es tu caso, vas a ver una diferencia del día a la noche si los pruebas. Así que si los quieres probar y estás escuchando esto del 1 al 31 de diciembre, haz clic en la descripción del video y vas a poder comprar un sample pack, o sea, la cajita de muestra, solamente por el precio del envío. Si estás en Estados Unidos, esos son $5. Ay. Si no estás en Estados Unidos y aún así quieres adquirir mucho producto por pocos envíos, puedes usar el otro clic en la descripción del video. Ellos envían a cualquier parte del mundo. Si no te gustan, puedes simplemente decir no me gustaron, devuélveme la plata, te devuelven la plata sin hacerte ninguna pregunta. Se los puedes regalar a alguien más, ni siquiera te dicen que devuélveme la plata, devuélveme el producto. Y ellos envían a muchísimas partes en el mundo. Ahora, si te pareció interesante este tema y quieres aprender un poco más sobre las bondades y todas las funciones de los electrolitos, te sugiero que vayas a su página drinkelement.com para que aprendas de primera mano con artículos súper interesantes cómo es que funciona toda la ciencia y toda la investigación detrás de la creación de Element. No olvides que si decides adquirir las sales, utilizas el link que está en la descripción, vas a estar apoyando también mi trabajo.